Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be giving you a tropical update on Invest 91L, which is in the Gulf of Mexico, and then also Hurricane Larry, which is in the central Atlantic, and that'll eventually be moving off to sea. Potentially could have some impacts in parts of Atlantic Canada, but other than that, it's going to be a mostly out to sea storm. So we're going to be covering both of those storms in today's video. Make sure you are staying all the way until the end so you don't miss any information in this video. And if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have a few heat advisories in effect for parts of California, as well as some excessive heat warnings in effect for some parts of California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. We have air quality alerts in effect for parts of the Northwest and the Northern Rockies. And then we have some heat advisories in effect for a little bit of Louisiana as well. Death Valley, California yesterday got a high temperature of 119 degrees. The low temperature was in Peterson, Utah. They got down to 19 degrees. And the highest rainfall report was in Ackerman, Mississippi, where they got 4.24 inches of rainfall. No snowfall reports yesterday. Here's a look at the 5-day outlook from the National Hurricane Center. You can see that we have two systems. We have Hurricane Larry, which is northeast of the Lesser Antilles, and then we have Invest 91L, which is out there over the southern Gulf of Mexico, and that'll be making its way across northern Florida as a weak system, and then eventually moving into the Atlantic again, where it could potentially spin up back into Atlantic Canada and do something like this. There is still some model discretion, so some of these models have this curving out to the west, and that is definitely a possibility, but I would say a 60 or 70% majority has this moving to the northeast. It has a 30% chance of developing within the next 5 days. Within the next 2 days, just a 10% chance of developing. So it looks like it's going to be a fairly weak system, but the main impacts will probably be in the form of rainfall out of that event. Here's a look at Invest 91L, located at 23.2 degrees north by 92.3 degrees west. Maximum winds of just 25 miles per hour and minimum pressure of about 1,011 millibars. You can see it's a fairly disorganized system as of right now. We're mainly just dealing with cloud cover associated with isolated thunderstorms within this storm. Eventually, it will be again crossing over further to the north and east, but as it does so, it will probably weaken a little bit. So I don't have too much hope in this storm to develop. I don't think it's going to develop too well. It may become a tropical storm, maybe even a low Category 1 as it heads out into the Atlantic, but it looks like this either way is going to stay as a fairly weak system throughout its lifetime. If we look at the model guidance, you would you see this and you think that it's kind of all over the place. Most of the models that have this taking this out to the west, there's only 3 of them. It does look a little bit more clustered over there. But in reality, the majority of these models have this going out to the east, so somewhere between Mississippi and the Panhandle of Florida is where most of these models have this storm heading through. Again, we do have some outlier models, but again, they're outliers, so they're not to be taken as seriously as the majority of the models. I would say, again, a 70% majority that has this going into Florida or Alabama with the landfall. And even when it makes landfall, I know a lot of people use that term landfall and think it's going to be a big system. It's going to cause some damage. It probably will not. It's a fairly weak storm, and most of the development will happen on the other side of Florida as it's heading out into the Atlantic. So I don't think this is going to be a big storm, mainly in the form of rainfall. It may produce 2 or 3 inches over some of these spots, but good news is that, again, it looks like it's missing out on those areas that were mainly impacted with Ida, and it's going to move to areas just to the east of there. So 2 or 3 inches within these spots is not going to cause too many issues. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, you can see that we'll only have a few models currently projecting onto here. You can see that we have 2 of them, 2 out of the 6 that go up to tropical storm force, but the majority of them either stay a tropical depression, maybe it curves up near tropical storm status. We'll have to see. Again, even if it does technically become a tropical storm, I'm not expecting too much out of the system. Here's a look at Hurricane Larry, located at 24.4 degrees north by 55.6 degrees west, maximum winds of 115 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 967 millibars, moving northwest at 9 miles per hour. It's a fairly well-developed system. It is weakening. It is in a weakening phase right now. At one point, I believe it was up near 120 or 125 miles per hour. The recent update had this at 967 millibars. The one before that had it at 958 millibars. So you can see that it is definitely weakening. It's not as strong as it was before. Even if you were to look back in the loop of the satellite imagery, it was much more expansive. You were seeing this cloud cover moving all the way down here. So that southern flank of this, you're not seeing as much inflow into the storm. So that is helping to weaken this system just a little bit. If we look at the actual metrics for the storm, again, it's moving northwest at about 9 miles per hour. So it is a fairly slow moving storm up to this point. We're not seeing anything that would signify that this is probably going to move on land. The closest that this may come to a landfall is going to be over Greenland, and even by that point, it'll be very weak. And any coastal impacts, that would probably be for Newfoundland and Labrador, mainly Newfoundland, where you could have along the coastal locations of Newfoundland maybe a bit of tropical storm force winds, although even that is up to debate as of right now. Here's a look at the key messages for Hurricane Larry. Large swells generated by Larry will continue to affect the Lesser Antilles, portions of the Greater Antilles, and the Bahamas through midweek. Significant swells should reach the east coast of the United States and Atlantic Canada by midweek and continue affecting the shores throughout the end of the week. So even though you're not dealing with potentially the wind effects out of it, you will probably still be dealing with some of the coastal effects. So rip currents will be higher, even if you live, let's say, in the mid-Atlantic even. So even if you're not in the Northeast, or even if you're not in Atlantic Canada, still want to pay attention to this. Even though it may seem like the storm is well out to sea, it will still have some impacts on the coastal locations. It won't be major impacts, but I would say even if you are going to go to the beach over that time frame, over the next, let's say, 4 or 5 days, just take a little bit of precaution and try and go there when there's a lifeguard present, just so that you can be extra safe with that, because there will probably be a higher risk of rip currents throughout that time frame. These swells will will likely cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions, and beachgoers and other interests along these coasts are urged to follow the local guidance. And then secondly, Larry's forecast to approach Bermuda during the next couple of days as a large and powerful hurricane, bringing a risk of strong winds, heavy rainfall, and coastal flooding to the island by Thursday. Tropical storm watches could be needed for the island later today, and interest in Bermuda should closely monitor the latest forecast updates. So yeah, again, Bermuda definitely going to be in the path of this most likely. Even though it's not going to make direct landfall, or at least it's not expected to make direct landfall as of right now, it is still definitely within that path of impact. If we were to look at the cone forecast, you're looking at this and you're saying, well, Bermuda's out here, it's not within that cone. But when you're looking at the actual wind field, you can see that extends to the left and also to the right, or to the east and to the west of that cone forecast. So the tropical storm force winds will most definitely reach Bermuda, or at least are very likely to reach Bermuda. Good news is that it's not expected to be a major hurricane while it's approaching Bermuda. By Thursday afternoon, when it's near Bermuda, it should be either a Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane, then continues up through parts of Atlantic Canada into Newfoundland, and then eventually weakens down into a tropical storm as it's touching the very southern tip of Greenland by that point. But again, it's going to be a fairly weak storm by that point, so nothing really too major. If you live up in Greenland, Newfoundland, maybe you have some impacts that you want to pay attention to, and Bermuda, definitely you want to be heeding the local advice of the National Hurricane Center to make your plans, especially regarding this storm. If we look at the track forecast for this system, you can see it's expected to make a close approach to Bermuda. Again, not a landfall, but definitely impacts for those areas. Then move up into parts of coastal Newfoundland, just to the east of Newfoundland potentially, and then it'll make a close pass to Greenland, and then potentially curving out near Iceland or into some of the Nordic countries as a very weak storm. So It looks like it'll probably make close passes to probably 4 different countries, but it doesn't look like it'll have really big impacts in any of these, except for potentially in Newfoundland and then also into Bermuda. Again, Bermuda probably dealing with more of the impacts. Newfoundland, it's going to be mostly tropical storm level winds with maybe some some rip current risk and also some high seas that you want to pay attention for. If you look at the chances of seeing 96 knot winds or greater, according to the European model, you can see that those would be, I believe, Category 3 force winds, and you're dealing with those category 3 or higher winds, and that's right around the center of the storm, and then it does weaken a little bit as it approaches Bermuda. Potentially though, that risk does go up a little bit, but it's still only about a 20 to 40% chance offshore. The chances of tropical storm force winds would extend into the path of Bermuda. So even though you're not dealing with maybe the extreme category 2 or category 3 force winds, you will still probably be dealing with some tropical storm level winds. If we look at the intensity guidance of the system, you can see that it currently is a weak category 3, then going down to a category 2 storm within the next, I'd say, day and a half to 2.5 days, and then moving back down into category 1 status, then eventually into tropical storm status as we get past that 4-day time frame. If we look at the tropical storm force wind probabilities, you can see that Bermuda is on that yellow cusp right there, where you're dealing with a 30 to 50% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. Eastern Newfoundland, you want to pay attention a lot more. If you live in western or northern Newfoundland, and especially as you're getting up near Labrador, probably not. You probably don't have to worry as much with this system, although you maybe want to pay a little bit of attention to it. And then you can see it would probably they don't put forecasts out north of 60 degrees, 60-degree latitude, but I would assume that you're probably dealing with some tropical storm force winds on the very southern tip of Greenland, and then mainly just dealing with the rainfall if you live into eastern Greenland or into Iceland as well. And then eventually we'll have to see what happens as it heads into some of the Nordic countries and into the Arctic Sea. If we look at the rainfall totals, and this is going to be mainly regarding Invest 91L, you can see that especially for parts of northern Florida, southern Georgia, and into coastal South Carolina, we're dealing with anywhere in that blue color, the lighter blue, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half. And then in that purple, we're looking at about an inch and a half to, I'd say, 2 inches, and then 2+ inches in that red color, 3+ inches, and where it kind of gets a little bit more of a vibrant red. So we're dealing with a decent amount of rainfall. Very good news that it's not going to be occurring over that same area that was impacted with Ida. Those areas only looking at maybe half an inch to at most an inch of rainfall, which still could cause some issues, but not as many as if they were in that 3+ inch zone. That looks to be again over northern Florida, where you could be dealing with those impacts. And again, I don't think this storm is going to cause too many life-threatening situations, but definitely something that you at least want to keep your eye on, and it'll probably have some impacts on your plans if you're going to work. It might cause some issues on the roads with the rainfall, but again, I'm not expecting too much out of this system in terms of the landfall impacts. If we look at the sea surface temperatures, you can see that anywhere in this orange shade right here is above 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 87 degrees. It's around 87 or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, so fairly warm for those areas. And once you get up into that color, and once you get up into that amount of warm water, that's where you're fairly decently within the area that hurricanes can develop and can strengthen. It's still fairly warm over the Gulf of Mexico, although Ida did help to upwell some cooler water, but it's starting to kind of recover from that. And you can see the track of this Invest 91L. It would be going over fairly warm waters. I don't think that'll help it strengthen too much, but if we look at Hurricane Larry, this storm is going to be going over some much cooler waters, especially as it heads further to the north. So you can see as it curves up near Newfoundland, you're dealing with sea surface temperatures that are going to be maybe 20 degrees Celsius, closer to 15 degrees Celsius, and then eventually up near southern Greenland and Iceland, you're dealing with maybe 5-10 degrees Celsius at best, which is around 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even some 30-degree temperatures Fahrenheit as you get closer to Greenland and northern Iceland. So you're dealing with fairly cold ocean temperatures. I think that'll have more of an effect on Larry's development as it's heading out of those warmer Atlantic waters and moving into the North Atlantic and Atlantic Canada, where you're going to have much cooler waters up into that area. So there's a big divide in terms of the sea surface temperatures, where you quickly go from 85 degrees to maybe 65 or 60 degrees within maybe just 100 or a couple hundred miles. So that is going to have definitely an impact on Larry more so than it will have on Invest 91L. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. So if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Just an update, they did release the updated Enzo outlook for from NOAA. So they released the discussion, but we're still waiting on some of the extra graphics. So they still didn't produce it on the NOAA website, where they have some extra graphics. I believe they didn't post the models yet for the upcoming month. So they update that every single month. That's regarding the winter discussion. So we did the winter discussion, of course, just a couple days ago, and of course I think a lot of you guys did like that, and I think a lot of you guys want more of that. So I'm thinking that probably sometime later this week or into the weekend, maybe even into next week, I'll put out the next set of winter discussions, because the previous one was based off all the August guidance, and now we're getting some of that September guidance. It's not fully out yet, so I didn't want to. I was thinking about maybe making a video for that today, because there isn't a lot going on in the weather except for these two systems out in the Atlantic. But I decided I'll probably refrain from that, just because we don't have the full information on it, and I still haven't reviewed it quite as thoroughly as I would like to just yet. So tell me if you guys want another winter discussion, and if you do want it, how long do you want me to wait to release it? All the information is going to be out probably within the next 2 or 3 days, so I'll start putting it together. But just let me know whether you guys are interested in another winter discussion, or whether you want some other types of videos on the channel. Again, that is going to wrap it up for today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.